All right, today we are talking about our second two boundaries, which are divergent and transform. So let's review our hand signs from yesterday. Yesterday we learned convergent collide, divergent divide, transform slip and slide, transform slip and slide. And then we also learned uplift, and subduction. So remember, when we have subduction, you have extra plate down here that's melting and turning into magma, and it comes back out as a volcano. All right, today we're looking at divergent boundaries and transform boundaries. You will be copying your notes from your warm-up and your Nearpod. That's where you should get all your notes. But I want to go over your notes with you just to make sure you understand all the important parts. So let's look at this middle flap. This is my center flap, divergent. Yesterday we did this flap over here, convergent. If you do not have this, if you do not have your notes made, if you don't know how I folded this back, then that means you skipped yesterday's assignment and you need to go back and do that. Can't move on until you've learned this. So today we're talking about divergent. It's your middle flap on your foldable. And with divergent, we have two places this happens. This happens at a continental plate boundary. So two pieces of land crust. And when they separate, it pulls apart and it kind of creates like a rigid valley. Y'all know what a valley is, but when you think of a valley, you think of like a smooth dip. This is called a rift valley because the plates are pulling apart and it is creating a valley, but it's rigid. So it's called a rift valley. You should have watched a cool video on this today and on Nearpod and gone on a field trip to a rift valley. All right, this is when we have oceanic plates diverging or dividing, and they are pulling apart. This is one that people mess up a lot because when they pull apart, we have magma that's coming up and it's creating an ocean ridge. So it's kind of like mini mountains in the ocean. So a lot of times people think it's formed the same way that mountains are, that it's uplifting, but it's not. It's that they're pulled apart. When the plates are pulled apart, magma is the only thing that's there to come up and fill that gap because there's a hole. So magma's coming up. When magma touches the water, it hardens. So magma gets to the water, it cools down and it hardens and it forms like a little ridge. As time goes on, this builds up and it gets bigger and bigger. And there are like mini mountains in the ocean. I do want you to think about this. If magma is coming up in the middle, then where is the newest crust? The newest crust is in the middle. The oldest crust is on the edges because it's been pushed out to the side. So as you get further out, that crust gets older. And if you think back to last week, we learned about Harry Hess. He was the man who discovered seafloor spreading, which is what this is. He discovered it because he took the date of the crust out here and realized it was older. As he went closer to that center of the ridge, the crust got newer and newer, which meant that magma had to be coming up. The crust had to be growing. All right, so if we look under our flap, we don't have too much under here. We just have our land features, which are rift valley and ocean ridge. So two R's, rift and ridge. That's how you can remember this one. At a divergent boundary, you get rifts and ridges. All right, last boundary is a transform boundary. Transform boundary is when we have slipping and sliding. So this results in an earthquake because what happens is these two plates, they build up so much pressure and tension and all of a sudden it's released. When it's released, we have an earthquake, and y'all know from like movies and stuff that there's a crack in the crust that's left. like the San Andreas Fault. So that crack in the crust that's left is called a fault line. So the only thing that you should have under this flap are the land features, which are earthquake, and fault line, which is a crack in the crust. So now you should have all 3 boundaries done in your foldable on page 3. And next week, we will practice more with these boundaries and make sure you remember which land feature is formed at what boundary and how the plates move. That's why it's important to practice the different hand signs that I've been showing you.